Welcome to Futurartist Records Presents. I'm Michael Hartsock, and my guest today is Julie Hawkins. She's a musician as well as a published author. She's primarily done historical fiction, but today we're going to be talking about her nonfiction book, Horses in Gray, which is about the Confederate war horses. Welcome, Julie. Thanks for coming up. You drove for a while coming up to do this, so
Thanks
I appreciate
for having
it.
me.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to jump right into it with, we've got a stack of books here, 4 books. How many books have you written total?
Oh, I'd say about half a dozen novels.
Okay.
For the most part.
Cool. When did you get into the historical fiction realm?
Well, I think I really became interested in it when we moved to Colorado. I'm originally from Iowa.
Okay.
But I was just intrigued by the Victorian era and all the old mining towns.
Sure.
And I thought, it just really, that whole era just fascinated me. And then when I got to go out to Gettysburg and see a real battlefield,
right,
I was inspired to start writing about the Civil War.
Right. So now, is that where the inspiration for this series came in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Originally, I wrote A Beckoning Hellfire and A Rebel Among Us. It was one book. And then I decided it was too big, so I split it into 2.
Okay.
And then I went back. Oh, then I wrote another sequel, which hasn't been published yet. And then I went back and wrote the prequel, A Beautiful Glittering Lot.
Oh, okay.
So these are published in order, and the 4th one's going to come out next year.
Awesome. Good. So how does that apply to Horses in Gray? Where does that fall in, or is that just a kind of a side, a step to the side from the rest?
Well, it sort of is, but it's also similar because the main character in this series of novels is a Confederate cavalryman.
Okay.
And I'm a serious horse lover, even though I've never had one.
Right.
Hear that, Mom? But anyway,
Right.
But anyway, the more research I did for my novels, the more intrigued I got about the whole Confederate cavalry, how different it was from the Union, because the Confederacy, the soldiers in the Confederacy brought their own horses, whereas the Union supplied horses for their cavalry. And when the war started, Union soldiers were mostly from farms, and they had been accustomed to plow horses or mules or whatever. Right. They couldn't keep up with the thoroughbreds from the South.
Right. And you talk about the thoroughbreds being, they came from an incredible lineage, most of them. Mm-hmm. And so these horses were absolutely incredible. And the people in the South, with their lifestyle being so different from the folks in the North, were really accustomed to riding amazing horses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it really created a huge difference between the North and the South in the way they approached their horses.
It took the North quite a while before they were as competent on horseback.
Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting because the North and South even commented about each other in that. We just, accrued this general's horse from the South, and boy, is it an amazing animal. And then you hear, we just ended up with a nag from the North,
Yeah.
And so it's amazing the enormous difference in their animals.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and Stonewall Jackson, when he first acquired Little Sorrel, that was his famous little horse, it was actually a captured Union horse. They had captured a train of horses, and he picked out a big horse, and he called him Fancy. But Fancy was too much horse for General Jackson. So he decided to give that horse to somebody else, and he kept Little Sorrel,
a little one,
which was small for him. His feet almost dragged on the ground when he rode him, but he could handle him because he was gentle.
Oh, right.
Right.
I think that's interesting, too. They weren't just tools for the Confederacy. They were, I don't know what the right word would be, but they were more than pets, even, most of them.
Yeah.
They really had a connection with these animals and really took care of them and knew what they were capable of. And really interesting.
Especially with the South, like I said, a lot of them did bring their own horses, so they were pets. But they realized how important they were.
Right.
If a cavalryman lost his horse, he couldn't replace it within 60 or 90 days, he was in the infantry.
Right.
So before they fed themselves, they made sure their horses had food.
Yeah.
They made sure they were properly shod, everything.
Yeah.
They took really good care of their animals.
And there were quite a few that had horses, sometimes several horses shot out from underneath.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely incredible how sometimes the soldier would come out unscathed and the horse would need replaced, and sometimes vice versa, where the horse would come out with not a nick,
Yeah.
and the soldier was,
Pretty weird stuff.
Yeah,
Lots
yeah.
of weird stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, one chapter in this book is about Nathan Bedford Forrest, and he had 29 horses shot out from him, and he killed 30 men. So he says he was a horse ahead at the end or something.
Just incredible.
But there's one horse he had named Roderick, and Roderick was shot in battle, and they held him to the back. And Forrest got on another horse, excuse me, and he was out there battling, and Roderick heard all the commotion, and even though he was shot, he came running for Forrest because that was his master. He was going to go get in the fight with him. Well, he got shot, and just right when he got to Forrest, fell at his feet. It's so sad.
It is sad, but it really shows a connection that they had with their animals and the drive that the animals had to perform. They wanted to do well for their master. They wanted to be part of that. They wanted to be absolutely incredible. That really struck me in this book. And you talk about Forrest, and we talked earlier about this in the show about, or before the show, about who we weren't exactly sure who it was, whether it was Forrest or Mosby, but the closeness of their horses, the lineage of their horses, having horses shot out from underneath them. They were also really proud of the speed of their horses. And I don't remember where it is in the book or the exact details, but a general, and I believe it was his lieutenant, had gone in to do some reconnaissance and ended up, behind Union lines. Yeah. And when the Union found out, started shooting at him, and so of course they took off. And while they're retreating, the general turns to the lieutenant, who he had just been talking about how fast their horses were in the quarter mile, and said, "I wonder how fast that quarter mile was." So, even while they're getting shot at, they were thinking about their horses and how they were performing, and just incredible the connection they made and how it influenced how they did things.
Oh, yeah. And Jeb Stuart, who was the commander of the Confederate cavalry under Lee, he held horse races all the time. He was a horse lover, fanatic, animal lover, music lover. You know, he's one of my favorite characters of the war.
Now, is he the one that had a band brought in to play?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but when you said musician, I remember reading about how he had brought a band in to play for the soldiers.
Well, the band traveled with him, with them.
Yeah,
for years. I mean, until they died. I think a couple of them died of smallpox or something.
Wow.
But, yeah,
just amazing.
I know.
Now, on a side note, you are an honorary Daughter of the Confederacy?
I guess I'm an associate member.
Okay.
Is what you'd call it.
Okay.
So I don't really have lineage. That could be proven.
How does that work then?
Well, with the daughters and the sons both, it can be direct descendant or a indirect descendant, like an uncle or whatever, great uncle, something like that. Cousin.
Gotcha.
Just so you have a relative there somewhere.
Okay.
But I don't have any.
So what's your connection then?
Well, when I wrote Beckoning Hellfire, we lived here in Colorado, in Longmont, and my husband got transferred to Memphis. So we moved down there, and I set up a book signing, and we were just new down there. We lived just south of the border in Mississippi, and we went to this little town called Hernando, and in the town was this little museum inside an old log cabin. So one of the curators, Miss Annie Ruth Brown, told me about some people that I should contact who would come to the book signing and dress up in their uniforms.
Oh, cool.
And so we contacted them, and sure enough, there they were, and they were all excited about it. They even got in trouble for shooting their guns off outside. Whoops. Barnes & Noble didn't like that.
They got a little excited.
They got a little enthusiastic. But their wives came too, and they all had their their Civil War gowns on and stuff. It was
I
so
bet
much
that was incredible.
fun.
Yeah.
And the ladies invited me to a UDC meeting, so I went, and I just got to know them, and they were so sweet and nice. They wanted to see if they could find out if I had any ancestry.
Okay.
So they did some research, and they didn't find any on my side, but they wanted to make me an associate member, so they
Right.
did that.
Right.
But they did find that my husband his great-great-grandfather was a Confederate,
Okay.
and he had no idea.
Right.
You
Sure.
know?
Yeah. Sometimes that stuff just kind
Yeah.
of gets lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, you just,
Yeah.
exactly.
Absolutely. Well, that brings me to you go down there, you have a book signing. Amazing to see these other folks that have that lineage and did the research, which brings me to how much research did you end up going through to do these books? There's an incredible amount of information in these books.
Yeah, especially the nonfiction. Whew.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Brutal.
very detailed. Yeah.
Yeah, I got any kind of book about the cavalry or anything horse related that I could find. I went scoured libraries, I did research online, and if I couldn't find the book, I'd search for it in an interlibrary loan. A lot of them are out
Okay.
of print
Sure.
because they're old memoirs and things like that.
Yeah.
from people who fought in the war.
Yeah.
And it took me quite a bit of time to research the nonfiction, probably 6 to 8 months.
Wow.
I'd say on average each book takes about 6 months to research and 6 to
Okay.
write.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
You had, speaking of memoirs, you had a lot of quotes and a lot of things pulled from diaries and journals and stuff,
Yeah.
which is really amazing. It brings a whole nother level of humanity to it. And it's interesting to me that no matter what side you're on, no matter what country you may be from, when you're in those situations, pretty much the language is the same. You
Yeah.
want to live, you want your family to be taken care of. And so it's interesting to read those memoirs because you hear a lot about it from the North. But when you hear about it from the South, you're like, well, these letters could almost be the same person.
yeah,
It's really, really cool to be able to see that.
Yeah, our Civil War was unique because it was virtually brother against brother.
Yeah.
Father
Yeah.
against son. Everybody had the same religion, spoke the same language, had the same upbringing,
Yeah.
the same founding fathers,
Yeah. Yeah.
same
Really,
same
really-
countrymen. And to be quite honest, it just I don't even see how they could live
know.
through it.
Yeah.
I mean, after
Yeah.
the war, there were 10 types of people, and they'd throw them away and use the glass for greenhouses because they
Yeah.
didn't want to remember it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so
Devastating.
tragic. So
Devastating.
tragic.
Yeah.
Everybody knew somebody that had
Yeah.
that they'd lost.
And it changed the way the United States moved forward, too.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really interesting that a lot of the Confederate generals, especially the generals, ended up being part of the House of Representatives and
Oh,
helped
yeah.
work with the railroads on the westward expansion.
yeah.
And really, once the war was over and people settled in to the new reality, these guys really moved the country forward in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Really impressive.
Yeah. And worked together. They wanted to unify the country.
Yes, yeah, and did amazing, amazing things that really brought the United States to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
Which is what it's supposed to be about anyway. Which was the good outcome of all of that was that the unification really created some amazing, amazing things.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing things. Now you have gotten an endorsement by an actor that was in several films. The one I'm familiar with is Gettysburg. Talk a little bit about that and how you got the endorsement and what's his name? What all has he done?
His name is Patrick Gorman. He's been in a lot of movies.
Okay.
But, like you, I heard of him from Gettysburg and
Right.
Gods and Generals and that. He played General Hood in those movies. But he's a friend of mine on Facebook.
Oh, cool.
So
that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just asked him out of the blue, would you like to endorse this book?
Oh,
and
awesome.
he did.
Yeah.
So
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, and it's cool because he's played those characters, so he's had to do his research.
oh yeah, plus learn how to ride and
Yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
gamut.
So what a great connection to have for an endorsement,
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Now, that leads me into the next thing, which is you've won some awards. you're on the list for some other awards. Why don't you brag about yourself a little bit? Tell us about some of those awards and how things are progressing on that.
Well, Horses just came out in July, so it's pretty new yet. Beautiful Glittering Lie won the Bragg Medallion. It also won the John Eston Cook Award in 2012. The first two books have been republished this year, and this book was newly published last year with my new publisher. These were self-published. This was with my new publisher, and then I republished with my new publisher the first two books. So that all the covers tie in together and everything.
Right. I was going to say the covers of those two aren't the same as
the original ones are not. They're famous Civil War artists that did those.
Okay, gotcha.
And the artist that did these is Dawn Dominique. She did all the covers.
Okay.
And then the one who did Horses in Gray is Dan Nance.
Okay.
And he's my buddy.
Yeah, that's a great cover.
Yeah, he does wonderful Civil War and Western art and military art.
It's reminiscent to me of the Remington art, which is cool. I love that stuff.
Yeah, me too.
It's and it's so realistic.
Yeah,
which is awesome. Yeah. So now, you are on a short list for an International Book Award?
Yeah. Well, I was getting back to the John Eston Cook Award. That's given by the Military Order of the Stars and Bars, which was originally established. They are direct descendants of Confederate officers.
Oh, interesting.
And every year they give awards for nonfiction, fiction. I think there are a couple other categories. Both A Beautiful Glittering Lie and A Rebel Among Us have won the award, and I'm the only author to ever win it twice.
Oh,
and sometimes they don't even
awesome.
award it to anybody if they don't find a book they deem appropriate or whatever.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. What kind of response are you getting on this one?
Really good. You know, my publisher for this book is Pelican Publishing out of Louisiana, and they've been around for quite a long time.
Yeah,
This one's Foundations Books,
Okay.
and they are new. They've only been around a couple years now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Actually, I was one of the first authors that they picked
cool.
up.
That's
So
cool.
yeah, but with Pelican Publishing, they do a lot of that themselves, and they have gotten the book into some national parks and places like that.
Nice.
So museums.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's
That's cool.
It's a process. Like I said, it just
Sure.
came out last July, so
Yeah.
it's still pretty new.
Well, there's a ton of information in that book, so it's not surprising that they would want other historical entities to have access to it.
Yeah.
You know, it just makes sense, which is great because that way you're reaching a whole different level of audience.
Yeah,
which is good.
exactly. I mean, a lot of people don't realize what an essential element the horses were.
Yeah.
And they all had personalities too, you know.
Yes,
and
they did.
They really did.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they were fighters and brave,
Yeah.
that just as brave as their officers were.
Roderick is a great example.
Yeah.
You know.
And people don't realize that. They pick up a nonfiction book, they read about battles, you
Right.
know, or who was involved or where it was at.
Right.
But not
Yeah, this gives
really-
a whole nother view of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. I thought it was interesting, too, people talk about the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, the westward expansion, and they seem to fall into their own category in history, and we don't realize that those all intertwine.
Oh, yeah.
And something I read that blew me away, didn't shock me, but blew me away that, wow, I never thought about that, was that General John Mosby, Civil War, General George Patton, World War II, they met each other.
Yeah.
When George Patton was a little kid, I guess,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that. I think
somehow-
that's really a cool story.
Okay. Somehow Colonel Mosby ended up in California where the Pattons lived, and he was friends with them. I don't know how they came to be friends, but somehow he knew them.
Right.
And George at the time was just a little kid, but he took a liking to, Colonel Mosby. And
Right.
so he was fascinated with all the stories that Mosby told him because he did have a very fascinating Civil War career.
Absolutely, yeah.
Some of it's pretty funny. But anyway.
Yeah, read this book. This has got some cool stuff in it. Very, very cool.
But yeah, they used to go riding out in the hills. Mosby would play himself, and George Patton would pretend he was General Lee.
Right.
And they'd go and make mock fights, and
That's awesome. Do you think that influenced George Patton and his style as a general later?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he wrote about it in his memoirs later on.
That'd be a cool read.
Yeah.
That'd be a really cool
Yeah.
read. You know, that brings me to something that is a quote on page 124. Really interesting quote that I think should make people think, and hopefully think outside of the box and a little bit more openly about things. And that is, General John Mosby wrote, "I am not ashamed of having fought on the side of slavery. A soldier fights for his country, right or wrong. He is not responsible for the political merits of the course he fights in. The South was my country." And after reading about his relationship with Patton, and they came from totally different, while it's the same country, totally different worlds and where the country stood and how they did things. And I think it's very applicable and something to think about, that when you're a soldier and you're fighting for something, while you might think about or believe in the stance, you're really a soldier and you're doing your job, and you're fighting for the position that you're in.
Exactly. You just follow orders a lot of times.
Right, absolutely. And I think after the Civil War, you know, with all the stuff that was unified and the great progress we made, George Patton could have said that very same thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it would have been applicable.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important to kind of get inside the soldier's mind and see, hey, look, I'm doing my duty.
Right.
And I'm going to do it to the best of my ability.
Yeah,
which
and
I
a
think
lot
is
of
really
them,
cool.
Yeah. In the North, they were drafted.
Right.
You know, but they could pay a conscription fee and get out of it.
Oh, interesting. Interesting, yeah.
Whereas the South, they started the draft later on, but you know, it was a lot different for the South because they felt like they were defending their homeland. They were virtually invaded almost the entire time of the war, whereas Confederate soldiers came into, you know, Pennsylvania a couple of times.
I think they
Ohio,
ended up close to Washington a couple times.
Yeah, and John Hunt Morgan had his raid in Ohio and things like that, but only a couple of instances, maybe 3.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting too, you know, that it was, we were talking before the show, that it wasn't the northern United States of America and the southern United States of America. Really, prior to the Civil War, it was a united conglomerate of states. So it wasn't, you know, the Civil War really turned it into the United States.
Yeah.
And we don't think about that a lot of times when we think about the Civil War, because we think the Revolutionary War and boom, the United States, but that really wasn't the case. And the Civil War helped kind of solidify that definition of the United States.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, for all of the nastiness that came out of it and all the things that we still fight about, it really allowed the United States to become the powerhouse and the innovator and all of the things that we've become. Probably wouldn't have happened.
That's right.
Or wouldn't have happened at the level that they have had it not been for this. So it's interesting history because of how it affected everything long term. You know?
Yeah, and it's kind of weird too because it wasn't cut and dry North versus South. It was there was a lot of Southern sympathizers, especially in New York. They didn't want to lose the cotton. Is what it was all about. And there were a lot of Southerners who didn't want to fight.
Yeah, they didn't want to secede. They didn't.
No, not at all.
Absolutely.
But then when their state did, because of states' rights, they felt they were obligated, and that's actually why General Lee left his commission with the U.S. Army. He was a lifer, military lifer, and when the war broke out, he decided he would go with Virginia.
Because that was his part of the world.
State.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
He didn't agree with any of it, but because he was military. You know?
I think that's important for people to understand too, is that the obligation, the ties to family and home country, not even necessarily country, state, or county, but this is my home turf. This is where my family farmed. This is where my great-grandparents are buried.
For generations.
Yeah. And that really held to their feeling of obligation to
Yeah.
to their position. Now, was it prior to or post, or maybe both, Civil War that Lee was at West Point? Was he an instructor at West Point?
I don't remember. I don't.
Because he had met some folks.
I know
that
he graduated like top of his class.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think he was instructor. I know Stonewall Jackson was.
Okay, okay. Because I think that's interesting too. Because West Point, every soldier for the whole
Oh yeah.
United States went to West Point.
Oh, yeah.
if they were taking it seriously.
Yeah, there were
you know.
two best friends.
Yeah.
I can't remember now which ones they were. One was from the North, one went and fought for the South.
Yeah.
I think it was Pickett and Reynolds or somebody. But yeah, one of them got killed at Gettysburg, and they were like best friends.
Yeah.
So
Well,
tragic.
It is tragic, and I think
Yeah.
it was interesting too that they would have. The Civil War was such a unique, one-of-a-kind situation because they. In this book, there's a great story of two friends, one fighting for the North, one fighting for the South, and the North had defeated the South in this particular battle, and or I guess the South had defeated the North in this specific battle, and had taken some things, and so one of the buddies left a note for the other buddy saying, "Hey, by the way, you took my coat. If you want it, come back and get it." Well, later they ended up swapping positions in the battle, and he left a note, "Here's your coat back. You know,
Yeah.
we should meet for coffee sometime or something." You know, and
Yeah.
so they were fighting, but they still understood that relationship, which
Yeah, it's kind of unique.
it really is unique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they used to trade, the soldiers when they were waiting for the bell, they'd sit on opposite sides of the river.
Yeah.
They'd chant at each other,
Yeah, they
take
played-
turns singing songs.
Yeah, and
They
play
would-
each other's songs.
Yeah, and they would float little boats across
Yeah.
with, like, the Southerners would send them tobacco, and the Northerners would send the Southerners coffee.
Yeah.
And just stuff like
Yeah.
that. It's kind of crazy.
It's-
They'd exchange
yeah.
newspapers, which
Yeah, to see what the stories were saying about each
Yeah.
other. Yeah. Yeah, something else that I found interesting was the impact of, and this is kind of going back to the horses part, the impact that the horses' deaths had on both sides. A lot of comments in this book by soldiers who talked about when the battle was over, you couldn't walk on the ground for the number of horses that had sacrificed.
Yeah.
And sometimes it almost seems like there were as many horses as soldiers that were killed.
Yeah.
And then, how the horses were treated. Sometimes they were given amazing burials. In fact, I think there were a couple monuments built on the burial site of some of these horses in some of those battlefields, and how others were used as tools and food. And
Yeah.
so, it depended on where it was and what time of year it was. And so not were they just ridden, not were they just soldiers in the battle along with their masters, but they were involved in every aspect of the war. And you don't think about that so much.
No, not these days. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't rely on horsepower, but back then that was their
Yeah.
mobilization.
Yeah, it was their go-to for everything.
Everything
Yeah.
except for trains,
Right.
But yeah, I mean, they pulled the artillery, they did it all.
Yeah.
They
In
were
fact, there's one.
ambulances.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. In fact, I think there is one story about a team of 40, I believe, horses that were hooked to a train to either pull it off its track or steal it, or I don't remember exactly what the situation was,
Yeah.
but, using horsepower against the machine. So,
Yeah, they did that quite a bit.
yeah, really, really interesting stuff. So what's next? You've got a book in process right now.
The fourth book in the Renegade series, that's what I call this nonfiction series, the Renegade series.
Yeah.
Renegade is the main character's horse.
Right.
So, yeah, we
A
call
nice
it
tie-in with the nonfiction
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, absolutely,
So
absolutely.
the fourth book will be coming out next year.
Okay.
I've also written a young adult book, fiction, historical fiction as well.
Okay,
It's loosely
okay.
based on my great aunt and uncle
Awesome.
in my hometown of Sioux City.
Awesome.
And during Prohibition, Sioux City was referred to as Little Chicago because of the stockyards there.
Interesting. Okay.
And so according to family folklore, my great aunt and uncle ran a hotel downtown. It doesn't exist there anymore, unfortunately. It's a parking lot.
Right, yeah, that happens a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, but apparently they had some involvement with the mafia, and Al Capone was a frequent visitor. And
oh, wow, interesting.
there was money hidden in the wallpaper,
Right,
and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, pretty
cool.
interesting.
So you prefer the historical fiction realm because you can kind of touch on real things, but then you can apply interesting storyline to the other side of it.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably my forte. I really do like writing about historical things and incorporating that into a fictional type of setting.
Yeah.
The nonfiction was interesting to write too, though, because I really learned a lot about those horses.
Yeah, completely different approach to your writing?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I tried to do it as a narrative, kind of, so that it's an easier read.
I didn't find it difficult to read.
Dry textbook type.
Yeah. No, I didn't find it difficult to read at all, even though there's a ton of information in it. There's a lot of information in it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like reading an encyclopedia. It flowed nicely, and you were able to get through it and understand what was being presented, which is awesome.
Great, thanks.
So, yeah. Where can we get your books?
My books are available everywhere.
Yay, everywhere.
Yeah. I have a website. It's jdrhawkins.com. My pen name is JDR Hawkins because those are my initials.
Right.
And you can get it on my website. You can go to Pelican for the Horses in Gray book or Foundation's website. They're available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, pretty much anywhere. I've even seen them on eBay.
Awesome.
So
that's cool. Now, I had gotten on to Walmart, I think. And I had tried to get it through Walmart, and they were sold out.
Really?
Yeah. So that's kind of cool when you sell out of something. I mean, that's what you want, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it on Walmart and Target too. I just Googled it, and all these random big box stores came up. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, we're going to add something else to this interview, make it nice and unique, because you're also a musician. We're going to play one of your songs during the credits. And folks, get this book, Horses in Gray. A great book. Tons of information in it. It'll give you a different perspective on the way the South approached things and the importance that the horses played in the way they did things. It's absolutely incredible. And stick around to the end. We'll have all of her contact information up so you can know where to find the books. And while you're reading that information, take a listen to Julie Hawkins and her music. Like this show. Make sure you subscribe to the show. Make sure you buy Julie's book. Definitely listen to the music that we're playing at the end. And for Captain's Lounge Studios, T.G. Lewis Productions, Futurartist Records, I'm Michael Hartsock. Thank you so much for joining us today on Futurartist Records Presents.
Brittle and breaking with each day that goes by. One more day without you, alone.